Hi, this is Joe Chambers. Welcome to Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage. Today's show is part one of a three-part interview we did with Argent and Colin Blunstone of the Zombies. In this interview, they talk about how they got together in their very first recording session. Hope you enjoy it. If you do, be sure to hit like, subscribe, and notification bell so you don't miss any of our new content. Once again, the Zombies. Welcome back to Musicians Hall of Fame. Today's guest is the great Zombies, Colin Blunstone and Argent. Can't thank you guys enough for coming in. I've been a fan since I was 10.
Oh, bless you.
So, to this day, if She's Not There comes on the radio, it never gets changed. It gets turned up. And Great. She's Not, tell her no, and of course Time of the Season, and I really liked I Love You. That was
right.
That should have been a big hit record. I thought a big
well,
radio
was,
record.
it was quite a big hit record, but for a Canadian band called People.
Oh,
and it was a B-side for us, but this other band covered it, and it was quite a big record.
Number 3, wasn't it?
I think it got to number 3. Yeah.
Well, should have been a Zombies hit.
Yeah, I know.
No, we're all agreed on that.
Yeah. And then of course you're an incredible songwriter as well as keyboard player, and I really don't know how you just had a gift, man, for the way that you were able to bounce the chords around rather than just straight strum. I mean, it made it difficult on me, to get the rhythm right. But what a great sound you created.
Well, it was, I don't know, when that was just the second song I ever wrote, and wrote it for our first recording session.
You're bragging now, right?
Well, it's part of the story really, because the thing is, we were so young and naive that when our producer said, you guys could always write something for the session, I went away and wrote something. Chris White, our bass player, went away and wrote something.
Right.
And I was full of the arrogance and naivety of youth and thinking that nothing could go wrong. I had no knowledge of any pitfalls. I just thought that anything that you did would be presented in the best possible way. The recording would be fabulous. That anything that I'd written, Colin would sing absolutely beautifully, and the harmless would sound great. I know, it was just it was crazy, really. And unbelievably, with all that feeling that only comes once, it all happened. And then it came out, and of course it was a huge record everywhere. But the thing was, many, many years later, I just thought we were being the Beatles in inverted commas, really. We were just making our song and just doing that in a very straight-ahead rock and roll sort of way. But I had a love for many different sorts of music, including classical music, but also jazz. There was a great jazz scene at that time. Around when I got, first of all, interested in rock and roll in around 1956, it was a great time for jazz as well. And the Miles Davis band with Coltrane, and Cannonball Adderley, and a bit later Bill Evans, and all these guys, all that was going on, and that sunk into my brain as well. I never thought we were using any of it, but somehow in the recesses it was there. And many years later, when I saw Pat Metheny and he was introduced to me, and I didn't think he knew who I was, but he said, Argent, you wrote She's Not There. I said, yeah, oh, thank you, He said, oh man, that modal stuff, it was just, he said it gave me a way ahead, I thought, to do what I wanted to do, with fusing jazz and rock music,
Right. Yeah.
And I said, well, thank you very much. But I went away and I thought, there's nothing modal about She's Not There. But I went home and I played the chords. And what I was thinking of as just being an A minor 7th to a D 7th chord, I'd actually constructed a modal phrase over it without thinking. It was purely unconscious. And I think some of those influences, and then, being full of also sort of arrogance as well, what I wanted to play all the time, and I always wanted to solo on everything that we did.
Well, and that was one thing that was so unique too about you guys, was it was not a guitar solo, it was keyboard.
But I really came unstuck with that, because on all the early TV programs we used to do, none of the cameramen understood that a keyboard player could take the solo.
Right.
So I would have my big moment, the camera would have been on Colin,
Right.
No one told me about it, and all this. And then we would have the harmonies, and occasionally, if we were lucky, we got a glimpse of camera. And then I zoomed into my solo, and the camera would go on the drums.
or somebody, but anyone but Ron.
Anyone but the
Anyone but
keyboard
Ron,
player.
I know.
So, that it didn't always work for me being a keyboard player.
Now, you did that. Is it true you did that in one take? Tell her no, or
she's not there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we did several takes, but for
First
instance,
take?
the solo was different on every take. I've heard some of the outtakes, and we truly used to improvise. It wasn't like we would work out something and set it. It was always improvised, but it was very quick, wasn't it? You would have
really
done the lead vocal in, and we used to do. We only had 4 tracks, as you know, in those days.
Mm-hmm.
So Colin would have a track to himself.
With the backing harmonies.
Oh, with the backing harmonies.
Yeah,
so it was fixed.
Yeah.
So the 4 tracks fixed the balance that you got.
Yeah.
So it would have been 2 or 3 takes. Wouldn't
Oh,
it?
it would be really, really quick. I think we did 4 or 5 tunes in that first evening that we were in there.
Yeah.
But I was just going to say about Rod's writing, it's one of the reasons it's so clever is that it sounds simple. And it is easy to play nearly correctly, but if you want to play it really correctly, and make it sound good, it's not simple.
I know.
And
That's what I was saying.
And it's one of the reasons why I don't really enjoy playing so much with other people, because they never get it quite right. And then it doesn't sound as good as if it was played properly. But some of those chords, especially for guitarists, Rod being a keyboard player, he plays these huge, great chords, and the guitarist is just playing a straight A minor or something into D, and it just doesn't work.
I ran into that problem.
Yes.
Trying to copy it there, but for some reason I was under the impression that y'all did one take on that, and one reason I was thinking that did you win a contest or something and have?
Yes, we won a big rock competition.
And so you had a recording deal from that, right?
Yeah, I think it was only for one single originally, and we recorded I think 4 tracks. In the first evening. I'll just say very quickly, because we did a talk this morning, and I told this story this morning, but this is our first session in a commercial studio, and it was in the evening, and the engineer, who was a very good engineer, but he'd been at a wedding all day, and when we arrived, he was absolutely drunk, and he was very aggressive as well. And so I've been in the business 60 years, but after 30 minutes, I thought this business is not for me, because we've got the headphones on. He was swearing and shouting at us down the headphones. It was really uncomfortable. And then we had a bit of luck, and he passed out cold, and we carried him out. 1 zombie on each arm and 1 zombie on each leg, 3 flights of stairs into the back of a black London taxi. We never saw him again.
So he was carried away by zombies.
Never seen again. And that was how our recording session started. And his assistant took over.
But that was She's Not There, right?
That was
She's Not There.
Yeah.
His assistant took over, just a young kid sitting in the corner. It was Gus Dudgeon, who went on to produce all of Elton's early albums, David Bowie, Kiki Dee, many, many people. And that was Gus Dudgeon's first session, and it was our first session. And Gus is no longer with us now, but he never forgot that first session. But it nearly didn't happen because the engineer was steaming, absolutely steaming.
I was talking to Robbie Krieger. And his first song was Light My Fire.
Yeah.
That was the first song he wrote. And again, it was just go home and write a song, and that's what he came back with.
I remember we only had 2 weeks, so I thought, well, I've got 2 weeks to do this, and the band's got to rehearse it, and we've got to get to it, and they've got to like it and everything. So I just put on what albums I had, and I just bought a John Lee Hooker album, and there was the first track on side 1, and I don't want to get sued for this, but was a song called No One Told Me. Now, I hasten to add that one phrase was the only thing that I had in common with that, except I just had it in my head that I wanted to start with melodically a blues scale. So I wanted to start with a blues scale. So, no one told me about her, the way she lied, no one told me about her, how many people cried. And then I wanted the second section to go into 3-part harmony, with the lower part not being the bass note of the chord. So we always had it in our head not just to do thirds, you know, that many people did, and many people made it sound wonderful. I mean, look at the Everleys, for God's sake.
Yeah.
And then building to a climax, because it's in a minor key, then building to a climax just on one note, but with a constantly changing rhythm, and ending on a major chord, and then coming right back down again to a minor blues scale. That was what was in my head. And I started with No One Told Me and just started to weave a story around that. That's how that song was written, really. And I guess it was written probably in about three or 4 days. And then we had our rehearsal. And actually, amazingly, it seemed to go great right from the first rehearsal.
I think we all felt it was a special song, and it sounded good right from the beginning, really.
Yeah.
In the front room, that's how we used to rehearse, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And you know, Rod just reminded me about how we used to do harmonies. And I know that people try to work out our harmonies and they can find it really difficult. And there's a reason for that. And it's because I was a very unschooled vocalist. And so what Rob would say to me was, especially when we got to the chorus, he would say, you sing what you think is the main melody, and I would often take the top harmony just naturally.
Right.
So we do that 2 or 3 times, so that's logged in my mind. And then Chris White's got to play bass, so Rod would write him a very simple harmony.
Often one note.
Often one note,
Yeah.
which left all the other notes for Rod to fill.
Right.
So his harmony was often just off the scale, you know, because he's having to cover everybody else.
Yeah.
But that's how we did our harmonies. But most people, they'll have someone who sings the top harmony, somebody who sings the bass, and somebody who sings the melody. But it wasn't quite like that with us. We had to adapt to our strengths and sadly...
Somehow it worked.
Yes,
Yeah.
our strengths and sadly our weaknesses. We had to adapt.
Oh, boy, everyone's got weaknesses.
Something that kind of struck me is your writing and on those songs was kind of reminded me of the guy. He was here not long ago. Jay, what was the guy that wrote Bus Stop?
Oh, Graham Gorman.
Yeah. So your songwriting reminded me of Graham, and the same kind of a feel. I mean, his.
Okay.
I mean, For Your Love.
Yeah.
Heart Full of Soul.
Yeah.
It was just. I think that you guys could have done those songs. Too, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
There's some kind of a kindred spirit to those songs.
Well, there was a lot of common influences going on in the UK, and it was strange because we didn't have a radio network like you guys have always had here, so there wasn't ever records played constantly from morning till night. We had the BBC that had a strict needle time policy, so I remember that just being, 2 record programmes a week. It was a half an hour in the middle of the week and a half an hour, you know, at the end of the week. It was crazy, really.
The Musicians' Union was very strong.
Yeah.
And they had lots of orchestras playing light orchestral music.
Yeah.
And because the union was so strong, they wouldn't allow records to be played except for 1 or 2 short programmes a week. And this would have been true when the Beatles were successful. I think so, 64. That was before, were the Pirates around then?
The Pirates started in '64.
Okay, so because the BBC was so strict about needle time, these pirate ships started up.
I was going to ask you, when did that start?
Yeah, it was
Because
around
that, with
63,
really
64.
enthusiasts manning the ships, and so they knew about the music and they were fanatical about the music that they were. So you got this real a contact with the audience, and it wasn't big business doing it.
Yeah.
It was these guys.
Right.
But what it did mean is that when the Beatles started, which was they had their huge explosion a couple of years before you guys did. It was 64 over here, really, for them, but it was 62 in the UK. And because they came from Liverpool, all the seamen, it was a huge port, so they would come back and they would get records from across all the genres in New York and bring them back. Right. And that was the music that would seep out. That's how they discovered Motown. Right. Motown became really big. Even the old country blues artists, you know, like Muddy Waters and John Lee Hooker, I mentioned already, and sometimes the jazz things that were going on. And we were amazed when we came over here and we would go into a club and see someone like Roland Kirk, who we thought had nearly godlike status in the UK. And I remember going to see them, and Chris White and I, and it might have been, were you there as well?
Yeah.
You were there as well. And one other drunk couple, that was the audience. And this guy was playing, you know. And I thought, this is crazy. But what it meant was we had a cross-fertilisation of genres going on.
Right.
And all the early rockers that were lucky enough to be 18 or so in 19 in 1964 had all these merging influences coming on us at the same time. And we were amazed when we came over to the States and did our first tour, that I remember being in Nashville and we were speaking to a couple of girls that we met there, and she was saying, the girl that I met was saying something to me like, oh, I've never heard that record. I said, you must have heard it. It's nearly at the top of the charts. But it was a race record, you know. So she would only hear the white artists and never the black. And of course Elvis and Buddy Holly and crossed those genres.
Well, I was going to say that I really kind of got my first taste of blues from the Animals, you know. Hey, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back.